In Chapter 6, we're going to look at a leadership theory called path-goal theory. It's a type of leadership theory, like situational leadership, where we need to look at the situation in order to determine what the right type of behaviors are for a leader. So here are the two main ideas in the path-goal theory. First of all, is that leaders should motivate followers to accomplish designated goals. So it's this idea of motivating followers, and the leader's behavior should correspond to, should take into consideration the characteristics or the needs of the followers and the work settings. So choosing the right behavior is going to depend on the followers that the leader is trying to lead and the work setting. So here we're focusing more on the environment and the setting rather than the traits or the abilities or the skills of the leader. We're saying what's appropriate for the situation. So here's the first basic idea behind the path-goal theory, is you've got some followers here, and you want them to achieve some goals. And that's the idea of leadership, is helping followers achieve some goals. And what you need to do is you need to get them on the path to achieving that goal, making sure that they go around obstacles and that they stay motivated the whole time to achieve those goals. So what does a leader has to do? The leader has to define the goals. The leader needs to clarify the path for the followers. The leader needs to remove obstacles or show followers how to get around them. And the leader needs to provide support, where that can be relational support, it can be like status and encouragement, it could be material support, give them the tools that they need to get that. But you need to do everything that you can to get the followers to achieve their goals. So that's why it's called the path-goal theory, is because you need to have a path for the followers to get to the goal. Here are some important components of the path-goal theory. Notice that this figure that I've provided here is a little different than figure 6.2 in the textbook, because I think this figure is a lot more clear on what's going on. What we want to do is we want followers to be motivated. And the way that we're going to do as leaders is through our behaviors. So we need to figure out what leadership behaviors motivate followers. And how do we determine what leadership behaviors? We need to consider the follower characteristics and the task characteristics, and that will determine what the appropriate behavior is to motivate the people that we're leading. So the purpose of path-goal theory is to help leaders figure out what type of behavior is appropriate to increase worker motivation in light of the follower characteristics and the task characteristics. Now, what are these leadership behaviors? Now, in the previous chapters, we've only looked at two types of leadership behaviors. We've got those same two here. We've got the directive behaviors or task behaviors. We've got supportive and relational behaviors, and those are the two categories of behaviors that we've looked at so far. But in this model, we have four types of behaviors. There's the task and relational. There's also achievement-oriented behavior, and that's where we give status or identity or praise to somebody when they do something. And then there's also participative behavior, where we allow people to be involved in the process. They have we can choose the process on how decisions are made, or we can involve others in the decision-making process, or whatever process that's going on. Now, when you try to remember the types of behavior, task and relational, just those two, that's kind of easy to remember. But how do you remember when there's four types of leadership behaviors? I like using the acronym TRIP, like I'm going on a trip somewhere. Task, relational, identity, and process. These are 4 things that I need to be concerned about in my behavior that I can use, that I need to be concerned about when I interact with my with people that I'm leading. At the end of the chapter, there's a path goal leadership questionnaire, and these are the 4 types of behaviors that are measured by that questionnaire. So, in order to motivate people as a leader, I'm going to have to use these 4 types of behaviors. But how do I figure out what's the right type of behavior to use in the right situation or circumstances? So for that, I need to consider the people that I'm leading, the follower characteristics. For example, I'm leading somebody, and for example, something that I do is I help students with their master's theses. In our master's program at Azusa Pacific, all of our students have to do a thesis with original research. And so I have found that this goal of creating a thesis is very challenging and a bit overwhelming. But if I lay out the path really clearly, what they need to do to get there, people can do it. So what I have to do is I have to motivate them to stay on that path so that they will achieve that goal. And if I do, they usually turn out excellent work, and I'm really encouraged by that. So how do I determine what type of behavior is going to motivate them along the path so that they can achieve their goal? Well, one of the characteristics of followers is need for affiliation. Some people have a high need for affiliation. They need to be close to people. They want close relationships. Other people have a low need for affiliation. They don't really need to be too close to people. But the higher the need for affiliation that somebody has, the more the leader needs to be friendly and concerned about them. That means more supportive behaviors. People that don't really care about being close to somebody, they don't need that friendly and conserved behavior as much. Some of it would still be good, but they don't need it as much as the people that have that high need for connecting with people. Another follower characteristic that we need to be aware of is the need for structure. Some people know exactly what to do already, and they don't need people to tell them what to do. Others are a bit clueless, maybe perhaps a bit ADD, maybe everything in the process is new to them. They need more structure. And so for people high in the need for structure, to provide leadership, a leader needs to provide psychological structure, task clarity, and a greater sense of certainty in the work setting on what they're supposed to do. So this means they need to have more directive leadership behaviors, telling people exactly what they need to do to get to that goal. And this is especially true if the follower doesn't feel capable of the task. They need to have it laid out really clearly for them what they need to do. Now there's some other follower characteristics that are a bit more difficult to understand, and one has to do with this, what the textbook calls a desire for control. Some people like just grabbing a situation, taking control of it. Others are a bit more passive and might be overwhelmed by the situation. Generally, people that have a desire for control, it's because they have a sense that they can control the situation. That's called an internal locus of control. They feel that they can master their circumstances and that they're not going to be overwhelmed by them. And if they know what to do, they can do that. So if people have this internal locus of control, leaders should allow followers to be in charge of their work and involved in the decision-making processes. Let them figure out the best way to go about doing this. So this means leaders need to have more participative leadership behaviors, letting other people decide the best way to achieve their goals, the path to take, and how they can best get there. Now, other people have a low desire for control, probably because they have an external locus of control. People that have an external locus of control feel like the situation is what determines what they do. They don't really feel like they're the master of their own situation. They might feel like they're victims, or that they're controlled by their circumstances. Here, leadership needs to relieve anxiety about outside forces controlling the followers' circumstances and show them what they need to do. And so they need to provide more directive leadership. Like people who have a high need for structure, more directive leadership, showing them exactly what to do so they don't have to worry about their own decisions, or if they lack self-assurance, you can assure them this is what they need to do and they'll be successful. Now, it's not just follower characteristics that determine how a leader should act, but also the task characteristics. What are the workers supposed to do? Now, if a task is complex and the rules for achieving it are complex, it needs a lot of thinking and figuring it out, but the person's not really clear on what they should do. Maybe it's clear what the right way of doing it is, but the follower doesn't know how to do it. Here, the leader needs to provide more directive leadership behavior, saying, hey, sit down, this is how you do it. You do step A, then you do step B, then you do step C. Now, a lot of times, followers need to do just merely repetitive tasks. They're the same thing over and over again, and they know how to do them. Take, for example, somebody flipping burgers at McDonald's. There, after the first few days, the guy has got it mastered. He knows how to do those burgers. There, the burger flipper needs more supportive leadership behaviors because he's already mastered the task, but he needs encouragement. He needs the positive feelings that come from knowing somebody cares about him. He needs the motivation that comes from being supported. Now, in ambiguous tasks, not clear how it's to be done because nobody's ever done it before, which is the case of a lot of problem-solving tasks like in engineering and in technology. Here, there needs to be more participated and achievement-oriented leadership behaviors. People need to be included in the decision-making process, get their brains involved, be respected so that they feel safe to participate and share their experiences. The leader has to do everything possible to get all these brains to come together to solve these ambiguous tasks. So the task characteristics also influence what leadership behaviors the leader should exert in this path goal theory. Now, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the path goal theory? First of all, it's a really useful theoretical framework. We've got 4 dimensions of leadership behavior, not just 2. That gives us a bigger repertoire of behaviors to choose from. And it gives us some useful variables to help choose the appropriate behavior. The work characteristics and the follower characteristics are what determine what the appropriate thing that the leader should do. Second strength is that it recognizes the importance of motivation, because motivating people to work is so important. A lot of people know how to do the work, but they just aren't motivated to do it very well or very efficiently. And it's a practical model because it emphasizes helping the followers, giving them what they need to accomplish what the goal is. Now, one of the weaknesses is that it's a bit difficult to implement because there's so many variables and it makes it confusing. And you kind of need to have some type of leadership course that forces you to sit down and say, okay, so how do the work and follower characteristics, how should they influence leader behaviors, and what are the 4 categories of leadership behaviors? It's an effortful process to make them all come together. But it still works, and it's supported by a good amount of research. Now, I teach at Azusa Pacific University, and we emphasize how does the material that we teach relate to the Bible. And the path goal theory is closely related to this idea of encouragement. And it emphasizes how important encouragement is, which is true for Christians, especially those who are trying to live together to follow Jesus Christ. In the Bible, there's a number of verses that talk about the importance of encouraging one another. For example, 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, "Encourage one another and build up one another." That's the goal of Christians working with each other, is to encourage one another, give them the motivation to do what's right, to love one another, to serve and love the Lord, and to build another up, to give them the skills necessary so that they can accomplish their goal.